When you die, your body ceases to function. Therefore, that which supports all thought and cognitive existence stops. That's the way it goes.
Eyes on Longmont, offering a diversity of topics about our community that will inform and entertain you. We invite you to sit back and enjoy this edition of Eyes on Longmont.
It began with the death of my father. He was, after all, my hero. I had looked up to him all my life. His interpretation of events, even emotions, was deeply rooted in logical thinking. I became like my father. Every aspect of human behavior was subject to scientific analysis. Yet, his death created a decidedly unscientific void in my sense of reality. It was as if some fundamental element of my being had vanished with him. An awareness of the finite nature of my life began to creep more and more into my consciousness. The fact that my life was moving toward death lingered in my thoughts. It was a feeling that I have carried with me from that day forward. I began to wonder about things that I had taken for granted. Who was I? Was I simply the sum of my experiences? What was this life about, and what was my place in society? My thoughts arose from this body, yet it did not feel like I was just a body. I imagined myself lying dead and asking, "Is that me?" Death had always been abstract and distant. As time passed, the thought of what death might mean became even more mysterious. Why did no one ever talk about it with me? And why did it make my family uncomfortable? Why was it scary? If matter is neither created nor destroyed, then where would the me go when I died? Over the years, the questions grew more numerous and the answers were few. I decided to seek the wisdom of people who deal with death every day. I sought out spiritual leaders who sat with the dying and spent extensive time dealing with the deceased and their families. Through a series of interviews with leaders in the community from different traditions of belief, I began to piece together a new understanding of death that brought me a greater level of peace. What you are about to see is a richly varied journey to explore basic questions about dying interpreted through the experiences of people who deal with death and the spirit every day. They are not likely to answer all your questions. However, I can only hope that this journey will give you, as it did me, some new perspectives, new ways to imagine and deal with what is to come.
So we begin with always that question, what is death and why do we die? Death is a stage of the natural cycle and process of life. And the whole universe is based on this, coming into being and passing out of being. The problem is for us humans, and we can't see the other part of the being that we're passing into. So we ask many questions. We want to know, but it's a part of the natural order of things. It's a natural process, and in order to deal with it, we've created fears around it because we don't know the other side, or we have tried to do everything we can to not have to deal with it in our culture and society.
The Buddhist teachers I've studied with are very concerned with, or you might say they're very attuned to death. And one of the key teachings of Buddhism is that you can't have death, of course, without birth. And in turn, according to Buddhists and Hindus as well, you can't have birth without death. And so the Hindus and Buddhists believe in the cycle of life, the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Birth, death, and rebirth.
What is death? Now, first thing, let us be very, very clear that there is nothing called death of me. I never ever die. I am an eternal, immortal, blissful light being. That's what I am. But at this moment, I am in a human physical body. This body is like a house. It is like a place where I am residing temporarily for certain things. This body is not what I am.
I'm not like necessarily thinking that I want to die. Death or life, what is the difference? Why I want to go there and why I don't want to be here? What is the difference? You know, these are not different. You know, like death or the life, both are same. Every day when we are practicing, like in generally here, when we are practicing here, each time when we meditate, each time we are experiencing the death. You know, there are sunset and sunrise. Both are equally beautiful. When it is sun arising, we are not looking for when I want to be sunset. When it is sun setting, we are not looking for the sunrise. Whatever it comes that moment, it has its own pleasure and bliss. We can enjoy that moment.
I have this image that we go on with the next stage. It's like a door that opens. Death is an instant. It's not any, it doesn't have any duration in time. I think it merely lasts but a very brief second, and suddenly we find ourselves in the next stage of the journey. And that's back as a return to the divine, to the holy that had brought us here in the first place. And that we simply arise or ascend into that wonder and glory that we've never experienced before. So again, it's the next stage.
Death in the Jewish tradition is very amorphous because we're an old religion, and we've been influenced by the people that we've lived with and the different philosophies. So I'm just going to briefly say that in the Bible, in the Torah, death is just referred to going down to Sheol, going down into the depths, or like the netherworld. In the time of the rabbis who wrote a lot of our texts, there were two different ideas, very different ideas. One was the Olam Haba, the world to come, and the other was Mechayei Metim, which meant the resurrection of the dead. And the Olam Haba is, according to Maimonides, who's a medieval scholar, a world where there's no eating or drinking or procreation or fighting or competition or jealousy or hatred, but rather people sit in the splendor of God with crowns on their head. So that was one view. Later, there have been so many different views. Jewish mystics have believed in reincarnation. And there's a lot of I don't knows.
If we face the death of others, we have to face our own mortality. People don't do that very well. That when they die, they're not really dead. It's not really going to happen to me. Well, you know, fine, if that's what you want to believe. But, you know, it's easy to close your eyes to reality and accept anything else.
Death, actually, death is a very important message, which death makes people having a fear. So that fear actually pushes us to seek for the truth. So after having the fear of the death, usually people are looking for finding the truth. That truth actually becoming a philosophy. Those who are seeking the truth from external, so they cannot find the true peace and wisdom for the death, in my belief. So those who are always looking for happiness only through external phenomena, in my belief, they cannot find the peace for the death. So those who are practicing finding the peace through internal, so then they can find the peace in the death.
I've had the privilege of sitting with all kinds of people in times of death, and they think all kinds of things. Some people are excited to die because they know that they're going to live into the promise that Jesus made to them. And some people really will say it that way, that they've lived a life of faith and they know that they're going to go to that beautiful place that Jesus has prepared. And some people aren't sure, but they're curious, and then some people are terrified. Most people don't seem to be terrified, but I've sat with a few people who have terror in their voice, in their look, in their actions, and that's the hardest. But like I said, not very many people are terrified of death. Most people seem to welcome it, and most people seem to be okay, even if they don't know what that means, because I don't think we really, any of us, know what it means.
I think people are afraid of death because it's such an unknown. I think that some people feel like there's a lot of reward and punishment associated with death. I've been with people when they've died, and you know, some people struggle terribly, and their death isn't, it's time for them, but they can't move through this struggling process. And for some people, they just die in peace. And I don't know what makes for that difference. I mean, I think some people have problems of relationships that they can't, that impedes their death. But I think for some people it's really hard to die, and for some people it's quiet.
After the plagues in 1348, there was a little block print book called Ars Moriendi, The Art of Dying. And it was a picture book that you read during your life about how to die and what's going to happen to you after you die, so that you know what to do next. We've lost that. People come to me and they don't know the story about what's going to happen if you're a believer in this tradition. They simply don't know, because we don't talk about it, because we live in this culture that is so afraid of death, and the body is the most tangible present of that death, because, well, it's dead because it doesn't move. That seems a very inadequate definition of death. It doesn't move. Just in the last 50 years, we went from a culture of saying that people were dead when their heart stopped. And that's no longer the medical definition. It's the absence of all your brain waves that creates death, legally and technically, for the medical community. And you know, in another 50 years, it might be something else. So to make those, you know, it's going to change. I think it's the inadequacy of our language.
I feel that the energy or the driving force, the motivation, the will to live, especially as experienced under very difficult circumstances when one's body is deteriorating, for instance, is an extension of one's attraction to life. And that attraction to life, certainly in the Eastern metaphysical religious context, is brought about by an attraction to illusion, really, the illusion that the next moment of life will bring one ongoing vitality. It comes to a certain attachment, an attachment to the future, an attachment to one's existence, which in turn ties into an attachment to the self.
I think people are afraid of death for a couple of reasons. One is we don't know. Even if you've read those stories of people who've come back from dying, those always seem to be a journey and not the end place. There's a journey of what happens to them and then they come back. And so I think we're often afraid of what we don't know. And none of us know what it's like, and we also all know it will happen. We can't avoid death. And it's scary. It's very scary when you don't know. And so I think that's one of the biggest fears of death, is we don't know what that means. Every now and then someone will tell me, what if I haven't been good enough, Pastor? And that's why they're afraid, is they think that they haven't lived their life in a way that will allow them to go to this promised place or this good place or whatever their image may be of what happens next. They're afraid they won't get in, that they won't be a part of the kingdom, or they won't be a part of whatever language they would use, that what if I didn't live life right? And I think that's the two biggest things.
So that fear, usually, for example, all sentient beings, let's say, why we all sentient beings are running, even for Buddhism, include the ants, cat, dog, or every creatures. Why everybody's are so busy? Like when we look at New York City or Denver or everywhere when we go, like everybody's are driving and become too busy. Why is that? You know, what we want. Every day we drive and drive and drive. And every ants, how much they are busy, like the same way we human beings are busy. What we want actually, because of we want happiness, we don't want this pain. We all are experiencing one pain, which equally we don't want that. And then when we open a refrigerator, what we want from the refrigerator? Always answer is one, that I don't want this pain and I want some happiness from my refrigerator, or whatever we do. So in that sense, when we look at this entire sentient beings have one religion, that is, we are seeking for happiness. So that likewise, so that we are living in this life, and then we know we will die someday, and then we don't want this pain. We think there's a big problem in the death, so we don't want this pain. And then based on this pain and liberation, so then there are lots of belief system became, and lots of different philosophy began. So these are all based on one issue, that we don't want the pain, we all want the happiness. In that sense, we are all one, we are all believing in one system.
So I never die. That is the first thing. So what is death and what is dying? The physical body is dying. The physical body which I have taken at birth, I am leaving that. The physical body is dying. But along with the physical body, I also have an astral body, I have a causal body, and I have got the soul which I am. The soul is inside the causal body. The soul and causal body is inside the astral body. The soul, causal body, astral body is inside the physical body. So when the physical body dies, only this is gone. I remain exactly as I am. my wisdom, my experiences, my likes and dislikes, my mentality, my wisdom, my consciousness, everything remains intact. I don't lose anything. What I give up is my gross, dense physical instrument.
Well, our culture is a death-fearing society. We are afraid of death. It's in our movies and it's in our media, and we watch it all the time on television and listen to stories and read books about it. But at the same time, it's not a part of our life. We don't live on farms anymore. We don't watch animals die. We don't watch our family members die. People don't die in the home very often. So many people are shipped off to other places. And it's just not something that we experience on a regular basis. Like I said, I didn't really have any experience with death until I was actually in the death industry. And that's really common. And most people don't go into the death industry. So they don't start having an understanding or a concept or a relationship with death until they're much older. And by that point, they've already developed a fear of it. Just because it's an unknown, it's something that we don't really know anything about, and we can have our own personal beliefs about it, but at the same time we don't really have any answers, and that's scary, and it's scary for me too on some level. But I think part of getting rid of that fear is being able to talk about it, is being able to not surround yourself with it, because that's hard for everyone, but to at least communicate about it, talk about it with your families, know what you're getting into. Being educated about it is really important. I think education is always what kind of keeps fear at bay and helps eliminate it a little bit, and that's really important. But yeah, we're well trained to be afraid of anything that isn't in our control or that we don't have the answers for, and it's just a natural reaction, I think.
We're all going to die eventually, and I don't think I personally fear the, not continuing till tomorrow, which we get into that whole religious, the continuing to tomorrow kind of thing. But yeah, no one wants to suffer.
There's a deep-seated fear of contamination from the dead, that I'll die, or somehow something will get into me from that body if I touch that body. And I think that's still going around, despite the fact that we're in the 21st century. It seems so archaic.
So having a fear of the death afterwards, it's all depending on each and individual people, so what they do after that. So that after that, if they are seeking for the truth and then having a little bit of a fear of the death, is not a negative. It is in fact very positive. So sometimes, like, the fear of the death itself is one little pain, but on that we are labeling that fear of the death is something horrible and bad, and like when we label it, and it double the pain will become double, and it makes lots of fear and anxiety. So without labeling a negative on that fear, if we take that fear as a positive, and that fear itself is a big support and teacher for us to find the truth.
If someone from my congregation came to me with a fear of death, I think I would ask them what they were afraid of. I think I would share with them some of our ideas in the tradition. Some people see death as a place where reward and punishment take place, and they feel that they haven't been good enough. And some of them are afraid of extinction. And, in the modern rationalist period, there's been a lot of thought that, we live, and then we die, and then we're buried, and that's it. So many people have that fear. I think some people have a will to live and some people don't. And the will to live comes from different places. I think that people feel that they have work yet to do, or they want to say goodbye, or they're very connected to this life, and it's not in a fearful way, but they embrace what's happening to them, and they're not afraid of death. So I think some people's will to live is just an affirmation of their life, and that they've had a will to live as long as they've been alive, and they want to share their life as long as possible. And I think it's a blessing, but I'm really amazed by these people. Not amazed like, I would like to be one of those people. That's what I mean. And I hope I am one of those people.
So no grieving is required, no sadness is required. When I die, I don't go, I just merge in this place only. The higher dimension is not out in space, the higher dimension is here only. And a dead person, just I have to think in my mind, and the dead person will be close to me. I don't see that person, that's all. My physical eyes cannot perceive that astral body of a soul. So I can't see, but I can definitely feel the dead beings alive here, absolutely. And they don't go anywhere, they're all here. My dead relatives, they're all here. My physical eyes are not being able to see them, but I can still feel them in my heart. I think of them, I pray to them, I will be able to feel their energy around me.
In order to help my students then understand when they've never experienced a death before, because they're going to be in chaplaincy, and you're inevitably in that work, you're going to attend a death. I begin to ask them to, I have a free write first, where they begin to just express their own thoughts. Even though they've never experienced the death, they've thought about it. So I begin to write down their ideas first before I lay my ideas on them, because it's very important for each of us to deal with our own stuff, rather before we get, told now this is what you're supposed to think. It's a huge range of stuff, all the way from emotions, their fears. They write a lot of questions. Some of them slip into the intellectual, medical side of things, and I try to bring them back into the feeling world, the world of emotional life and the world of the heart rather than the head. I say, get out of your head. So we go around and share our writings and then have a conversation about it. The way I can tell that they are in a fear state to talk about death is they go into their head. They become intellectual about it. And they will typically try to scramble for what their faith background has taught them. And a lot of us really aren't familiar with that, because we don't spend time thinking about it in this particular culture. So it ends up with a lot of questions for them, which I find interesting, because death is a big question for us.
Would actually, when we find the feeling of the death, when the death arises, say for example, now I am about to die, again there's a feeling of the death. You will do the same thing, you'll be fighting with yourself. That feeling itself is very sour, because we recognize that feeling. First thing, the death is something bad. And second thing, we have a fear, and then that fear arises. We kind of always trying to figure out, how can I destroy this feeling, that fear? So then that behavior actually, if continue, then death can't be peaceful, because of you start the death with very negative and violence yourself and unfriendliness towards yourself.
How do we help people feel more comfortable with dying? The inevitable, that we're all going to die. We know that much. So how can we help people feel more comfortable? I think one of the things is that we keep open dialogue and discussion about it. People died at home always, and people were around, and kids were there, and now we've put people in the hospital or at the hospice care unit, and it becomes more of a secret. We hide it away. And I think that one of the things is just to have dialogue, to talk about when you sat with someone who died, to understand. I often share the story of my daughter's death, and people say, she was smiling? She was okay? Yes, she was. It was peaceful? Yes. And just having some bits of knowledge, just like anything, that helps. So how do we help people not be afraid? Talk about it. We're afraid of talking about death, and I think that creates a culture of fear around all kinds of death. And let's talk about it. Let's share stories. Let's let people see death. Let them understand. And through that, it's maybe not as scary.
There is something within the human spirit, within the human drive, this attachment to the illusion of self that keeps one grasping for it and attaching themselves to it. I think one of the key teachings about death and one's approach to death is that one really needs to release it. You have to release your attachment to the mundane world, the illusory world, the world that our eyes see and that our ears hear, that we have become so attached to, and the idea that we have a self living within that illusory world. Once you can release your attachment to this world, then you are in essence free to die.
The fear of the death, the fear. The fear is another emotion which, when it is arising, for example, if you have the fear of emotion right now, where is it? You see, where is it? Is it there? Right now, just look at yourself. Observe your feel, that fear. Where is it? I never find, when I don't look at it, it's there. When I looked at it, it's not there. What does that mean? If we live all our life at the door thinking this is the haunted building, there's so many ghosts inside. So we have two choices. Either we face the ghost or live our life with the fear of the ghost outside. So we better face the ghost. We come in and turn the light on and try to see where's the ghost. Ghost is not there. One time I come in, ghost is not there. I go out and then fear is there still. Where is this fear coming from still? Even though I saw there is no ghost. The fear because of the habit. We have been thinking, we have been remaining with the fear of ghost for so long that habit is making us more fear. So that how can we get rid of this habit is we have to repeatedly come in. Repeatedly come in, and we have to even sleep inside, and we even have to call, where is the ghost? Come on, I want to meet you. You have to make one invitation for the ghost, yet you will not find the ghost. So that is the day you will be free of the fear of the ghost. The same thing, the fear of the death.
Death cafes are a big thing that are kind of taking over in the United States. They've kind of gone over to Europe a little bit. I have no idea where they started. Someone that feels the same way like me got out there and got the ball rolling, and I think it's awesome. So the idea of a death cafe is to have a conversation, an educated conversation, out in the public where people can accidentally overhear it and at the same time join in if they feel comfortable. So the point is to create a positive environment where people can talk about something that is so taboo, something that they've had to keep to themselves for such a long time, that now they have this comfortable place. It's in a coffee shop, or it's in a restaurant, or it's in a home where they're already comfortable, where they maybe already spend hours a week there, and now they're given an opportunity to speak and to ask questions and to voice their opinions and tell stories about some of the things that they've gone through, and hear that they're not alone, and hear stories from other people. And I think that's the best way, and one of the only ways that we're really going to get rid of this fear of death is by talking about it. So that's the movement.
Addiction to life is there. Everybody wants to live. Nobody wants to die. Every day we see people dying, but nobody, I also will not like to die. The body may be suffering, the body may be old. So this addiction to life is there inbuilt in us. And in our yoga psychology, it is called avinivesh. It is one of the big cause of pain. So addiction to life comes because of our attachment to the body And because we don't know what happens after death, so if we know correctly what happens after death, and death is not the finishing of my personality, and my body, I am using this body for a particular purpose. When the purpose is over, I don't have to cling on to this body. So then that person with the right education and understanding knows how to let go of this body and its attachment, and doesn't feel any fear or sorrow to give up the body. The fear, the sorrow is because of wrong understanding. If people think that after death I will have to go to hell, so they will cling on to life, they don't want to die. That is a wrong understanding. If people think that after death there is a purgatory where I have to suffer, so they will have fear, they will cling on to life, they will not like to die. But if people are told, look, no, after death you are going into a sphere of light, beautiful light, there is nothing called death, you will just enjoy. That person, that is the truth. So when the truth is known, Jesus made a statement, know the truth and truth will make you free. So what is the truth about my life and my death? Let that truth be known. Then the fear will go, clinging will go. But unless somebody is ready to face the truth, to learn the truth, to experiment, research and find out the truth, if somebody is blocked in a belief system, that person will always have his fear of death, and always. So let us try to come out of our belief systems. Let us put our belief system into a proper scientific research framework. Let us face the truth, know the truth. That truth will free me from all fear, of all attachment, of all clinging to life.
Although my father died decades ago, the curiosity he instilled in me inspired this exploration of the nature of death. Death still remains a mysterious and wondrous event. Yet, it no longer holds the same power over me that it once had. Hearing the experiences of our spiritual guides has changed, ever so slightly, how I feel about the future. Perhaps it will be my next great adventure.
When we walk slow, we sometimes forget where we wanted to go. There's a traffic rush inside your ears, and in your head your thoughts and fears speed by so fast. It's time to tell them no. When we walk awake, we sometimes can hear sounds that clouds will make. There's a music in this living day that lifts you up to float away and dream a bit. It's time to take a break. There's a sadness that keeps calling out. The world seems deaf to every shout, but love is there no matter where you roam. La da 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 da, la da da.